How is everyone doing? I'm Michelle, and I am going to be reading from Jim Stevens' book today. There it is, 101 Proofs for the Existence of God. So, Jim Stevens, he's a dear friend, very honest, very straightforward, and something I really like about him a lot is he's quite centered on God, very practical in this respect, but he has a big heart. We're inside today because it is just boiling hot outside to the point where my tennis shoes were melting to my concrete porch. So here we go. Yeah, this particular proof is number 54, and it's called Trophic Cascades and Wolves. Okay, here is a very eye-opening story about a relatively new discovery in research on ecological systems. Scientists used to believe that conservation efforts to restore ecosystems must follow the pattern of evolution. In other words, you had to start at the bottom in the lowest trophic levels. The term trophic refers to different levels of the food chain. For example, plants, insects, and etc. A cascade is like a stream falling down a waterfall and breaking into more and more streams with each rock it splinters against. Beautiful. The concept of trophic cascade describes when a large carnivore at the top of the food chain has a cascading effect down to all the lower levels, and it spreads out in many, many directions and has many diverse, even unexpected impacts. The most stunning example to date comes from Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. There had been no wolves in the park for 70 years until they were reintroduced in 1995 to 1996. If you have 4.5 minutes to watch this video that Jim includes here, the link in his book, I think you will be astounded. It is called How Wolves Change Rivers. Okay. My synopsis of the video. Wolves kill some species of animals for sure, but we now know they give life to many others. Elk populations had built up in Yellowstone until by grazing they reduced much of the vegetation to almost nothing. The new wolves killed some of the elk, and it radically changed the behavior of the elk. They started avoiding certain parts of the park where wolves could kill them easily, especially the valleys and the gorges. Vegetation in those areas started to regenerate immediately. The height of some of the trees multiplied 5 times. In just 6 years, aspen, willow, and cottonwoods came back. Birds then started moving in. Songbirds and migratory birds moved in as well. Beavers started to increase because of the young trees. Beavers built dams in the rivers and provided habitats for otters and muskrats, ducks and fish, reptiles and amphibians. When the wolves killed coyotes, the number of rabbits and mice increased. Then came the hawks and the weasels and the foxes to eat those prey. Also, badgers, ravens, and bald eagles came to feed on the carcasses left by the wolves and other available small prey. Bears came back too. Bears also killed some of the elk and reinforced the impact of the wolves. Even more amazingly, the wolves changed the behavior of the rivers. Because of the new vegetation, the rivers meandered less. The river banks had been stabilized and collapsed less often. The channels were straighter and became deeper. There was less soil erosion. Pools formed for all the wildlife to drink from. The ecosystems we are seeing are definitely not survival of the fittest or a dog eat dog world. Even the main prey of the wolves, the elk population, was not harmed. As a whole, they were hardier and more disease free. See, good news. The old and sick were culled out. They were forced to get stronger to survive. All of the species benefited: the plants and the trees, the insects and birds, small, medium, and large animals, even the fish and amphibians. Even the rivers and streams benefited. Scientists following evolutionist models got it wrong. All aspects of nature fit together harmoniously. They believed an ecosystem was built from the bottom up, and so tried unsuccessfully to introduce plants. Just as I explained about how the intricacies of the first living cell in chapter 41, proof number 41, had to have been designed, we can see this interconnectedness and codependency of all creatures at higher levels of nature must have been designed as well. Chance and blind mechanisms could not create such complexity, especially not in such a top-down cascade model. The wolves in Yellowstone are a marvelous example of an intricate ecological system that is impossible to conceive could have happened randomly or even by natural selection. And Jim says, see my chapter on how the mechanism of natural selection, chapter 35, loses variability, not gains it. When something is designed by intelligence, the final goal is known, and all the building block steps support the end goal. In this case, the wolf at the top of the mountain of the Trophic Cascade was already conceived of before all the other creatures ascending up the food chain were put in place. Otherwise, the benefits cascading down would not exist. Scientists are now discovering more and more trophic cascades besides wolves. Every time a new one is discovered, it reinforces the evidence for a designer by new orders of magnitude. It is exponentially more difficult to create two trophic cascades than one. John Muir, here's a quote from John Muir. When we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. Wow. So that's from John Muir. So Jim says, there must be God. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, pretty awesome. So next, I'm going to be reading a very interesting proof for the existence of God. It's called Jigsaw Puzzles. Okay? So I'll see you another time. Take care.